So this is a very directed conversation, and the hope is to get at the crux of maybe something that's been bugging you for a while that you'd really like to kind of shift or at least start to loosen up through this conversation. So with reference to what that thing might be, could you tell us in a way uh, what led to our having this conversation in relation to that? So why are we talking to you right now? What series of events alerted you to the idea that, do you know what, it's time to address this particular issue?
That I mean, I think it's always it's a series of events, isn't it? It's a series of paths that converge and things. I think I saw what you were trying to do, and I went, I've got lots of these questions that I want to try and answer. Um, I've I've been perceived as successful in my area, but I don't feel successful. And so that imposter thing is like really quite crippling sometimes, but I hide it quite well. Um, I think I can see myself kind of in the third person in professional settings, just going like, why am I here? This is like stupid. Um, and I think, you know, a realization of that and also a safe space to come and talk about that kind of stuff is really important. And I've not really had that opportunity to do that. Um, so new year and an opportunity just to kind of get through some of the things that I think hold me back. Some of those, the chips on my shoulder would be quite sensible, I think.
Great. It's very lucid.
Yeah, well,
Sure.
like, it's a weird one because, you know, I'm very unimpressed with myself, but occasionally in awe. And, you know, quite self-aware, but also full of shit. And it's like, I am incredibly lucid, incredibly self-aware, and I think that's part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. So being too aware of what's going on internally, and when there is conflict that's arising.
Both.
Okay.
So there's always a kind of, I feel like there are always moments where I'm reading situations and going, I wouldn't be doing it like this, but I don't feel like I can turn around and go like, we've got to do something different. I'm always in conflict with myself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it sounds like it'd be a nice direction to get on with yourself a little bit more going forward.
Yeah, I think so. But you know, at the same time, I'm also very philosophical, very happy. I don't feel like there's stuff that I can't do. Like it's I hit 40 like 3 or 4 years ago, and I think that kind of quote unquote midlife crisis is also like a crippling moment for quite a lot of people where they go like, oh my God, like that all looks pretty cool what I've just done. What the heck am I going to do next? And what about the expectations and all this kind of stuff? And I think the last couple of years have been more crippling perhaps than the previous 25.
Mm-hmm. So thinking about, and we're going to dig into that and maybe what I like to think of it as initiation rather than crisis, although I think they're very intimately related. So digging into that in a little bit, what that looks like, and perhaps some of the jewels that it points to, the crisis around meaning, around direction and other things. But thinking about what would be a successful outcome from this conversation, what are some of the key things you'd ideally like to get from this inquiry today?
I hadn't really thought about that. I hadn't really come with a list of things. I think discussing things in safe spaces with people who are clearly very good at what they do, and you know, with a community of people that I imagine are all feeling pretty much the same crippling worry occasionally about who they are. And that's almost a good outcome straight away, right? So that's almost like, okay, this is good. I've made the first step through that kind of peach-shaped door, so that's good. I think having 4 or 5 things that I can try and do over the next 12 months is a pretty decent place to go.
Okay.
All right, I want to clarify that just a little bit more. What do you feel in the early years of your 40s that has become more pressured, that it may be a little bit more stuck, that you want to loosen up or resolve? What kind of needs to flip here, do you think? Because it feels like there's an emotional locking happening that could come unlocked, if that makes any sense. And I feel like if we can get a sense of that, we can kind of think about the more practical ways of loosening it.
I think since that kind of since that 40 jump, I feel like I put more pressure on myself to achieve some of the things that I thought I would have achieved at that point. Right. And so actually what I'm hoping to be able to get to is a place where I don't put that pressure on myself, and actually it's all right. Like, this is cool. The celebrating quite a lot of the successes that have happened are probably as important as worrying about the next ones. Do you know what I mean? And so,
yes.
So again, I'm kind of answering my own query, but yeah, I don't. Yeah, that's not a very good way of answering your question.
I don't think it's. I mean, I'm hearing something about actually wanting to be a little bit more at peace with yourself going forward, feeling all right without relinquishing the drive to achieve and accomplish things. That maybe it just doesn't have to be quite so. It sounds like it can be tortured.
Yeah, it is quite I think it's difficult for a lot of people, is to go like, oh, there's an expectation that I'm going to do something like brilliant next, or a lot of people keep talking to me about things that I have done, not the things that I'm going to do. And I guess that past kind of pulls back a little bit. There have been books published and talks done and things happened and newspaper articles written, and I don't know, like a lot of that I think holds me back slightly, because I'm sort of slightly worried about like the level that I hit in my early 30s and then just not quite managing to keep up with that pace. And that I knew right at the end of last year that if you carry on kind of at that mental pace, you hit burnout at some point, because you're going to go, I'm just like beating myself up all the time about being that person that I'm no longer. And so I have to just try and find a way of making peace with that.
I'm curious, can I jump in here? Because we change with life and chapters, and the things that we do when we're 30 have a connection with, but don't necessarily reflect the people that we become when we're 40 or 50 or 60 or however old we are at the stage that we're asking ourselves that question of who we are. And so I'm curious, what does Pete of today value? What are the things that you feel give you a sense of purpose and connection and beauty and wholeness in life?
Yeah.
At this point,
there are two Petes, but there are two of me. Like literally, there's the guy at home who's got like an amazing wife and two brilliant kids who are like 10 and 14, and we kind of goof around and do all that kind of stuff. And he's very kind of very again aware of the privilege of all of that, and the hard work that got to this safe space for everybody around me. And I think that's pretty decent. Like, that's good. Then there's like the professional me that's going, oh crap, what do I do now? Like, this is kind of weird. And so those two Petes are slightly in conflict with each other quite a lot. And if you dip too far in one way, then the other thing gets affected, and so on and so forth. And I think trying to find a little bit of balance there is really important.
So who, and let me just, have you by any chance got a light you could put on in front of you? Because we're starting to lose your face a little bit. It'd be nice to...
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
that's a little bit better. Yeah,
Dashing.
thank you.
I don't know about
that. Who's the Pete who's aware of the two Petes?
Ooh, that's a meta question, isn't it?
That's such an Aaron question.
That is such an Aaron question. Holy smoke. Friday.
Straight into the non-binary.
Yeah, right. Wow. I mean, I think it changes, if I'm honest. If I'm going to be like meta and try and answer that in that way, I think it really depends. I think it's very much who's busiest at that time. And what I mean by that is like, there are weeks when I can be all in on one side or all in on the other side. And that's just been me kind of in life. And I think, so again, that I think, I'll tell you what's happened in the last couple of years though. And I think this is maybe going to answer that in an indirect way, is my job is now, my job, I'm looking at what I do for a living and realizing that what I do for a living will have an impact on my children. So the fact that I work in big technology, AI, designing the manipulation of the masses and all that kind of stuff, I've been looking at the things that go on at home and go like, oh, sugar, like we've built quite a lot of stuff that's going to affect those two amazing people in my life at home. And so I think the blurring of those lines has been quite uncomfortable. Or the realization of those lines blurring has been quite uncomfortable. And that might be where a lot of this conflict is coming from, which is like, actually, the two Petes have been quite separate. The two Petes are starting to blur. And there's a probably professional Pete looking down on both of those things and realizing that, there's a problem brewing on the horizon, which affects, my son and my daughter.
Well, let me kind of reframe that a little bit, just so we're all on the same page going forward, in a sense, right? That it's uncomfortable. That discomfort is a good thing, right? That discomfort is what brought you to this conversation. And if we can enable that discomfort to inform the middle Pete, who I really want to think about, because I think it's the splitting of the two different Petes that feels conflictual, and that actually putting some attention on the Pete that knows both of them will help integrate those two different aspects. So the challenge is an alert to the worry about your family life and your kids. That's an important one for both Petes to listen to, right? And if you take the Jungian model, which we talk about a lot, that there's the main force is an individuation force, which is how do I become the best expression of who I am. And on top of that sits these different personas, the work persona, the home persona, the fun persona, but they're not separate things. They're just different expressions, right? So if we can try and focus on that middle bit and use all that information, like all the pinch points in the persona spaces, I think we'll kind of start to clarify direction for you.
Okay. Do you hear quite regularly from people who compartmentalize themselves in this way?
We all do it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, okay, it's a natural thing to do.
I do it.
All right, that's the first. Yeah. That's the first box ticked.
Yeah, so you can feel at home with everybody else, and I think one of the things that happens with imposter syndrome is it's when you're coming from one of those persona positions, and you're not incorporating the other ones, and then you get this internal doubt and conflict going on because it's not an integrated experience. One way in which imposter syndrome can happen, right? Because these other bits are being missed. And while it doesn't generally entirely go away for anyone, if you can kind of see where it sits, it's really important. So if with you at the moment, it's kind of like, okay, I want to go in this direction, but there might be some, I don't know, ethical concerns or ideas about, whether it's good on the family side to keep pursuing the professional side, then there's a little warning bell, right, that you need to listen to and then make a decision about from middle Pete. Because if just professional Pete makes that decision or just family Pete makes that decision, it's not going to feel right.
Yeah. Interesting. Middle Pete's probably sometimes going to me, why don't you just go and open a record store? Or like, why don't you just go and get a lifestyle job? Or do something just completely like different because it might make all the conflicts go away, or it might make the guilt thing go away. So again, I mean, I'm still kind of
let's find out.
Going,
right.
Let's definitely not going to go and open a record shop. That's
no, but the fantasy, and I'm not even sure that's middle Pete, but the fantasy like that tends to be informative. Like, then what would that give you? And we can start. I'm sorry, I don't want to get too off track of our interview schedule, but we can kind of start thinking about that that as well. But I wonder if we cannot, the three of us, agree that the direction that we're going in is kind of getting that integration going, finding out what middle Pete might need to make some of those decisions.
Okay.
Let's
find out. Let's make middle Pete.
Are you buckling yourself in? You look like you're not so sure.
I mean, I came with 2 Petes and now I have 3. So,
by the time we leave, we'll have a whole family of Petes.
All right, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, you're lucky if it's only 3. But let's say middle Pete. Maybe middle Pete's not good. Let's say like the Pete that witnesses all of the different manifestations of Pete, right? The one that's aware.
I know what you mean.
Of everything.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Aaron, I think you're going to take the lead on this one.
Right, I was just waiting. I took us off. Okay, so what do you think might be getting in the way for you of releasing the tension? So like releasing yourself into being the middle Pete, right? Who can move forward maybe with some choices. They may not even be choices that can unlock this kind of stuckness that you've been kind of describing.
I know that I need to get out of my own way. So I know that I need to stop worrying about the what ifs and start and actually what's weird about that is I have a feeling and a reputation sometimes of just knee jerking. So even professionally, I do stuff and people sometimes go how do you smoke? That's brilliant. But that's not the way we normally do stuff. But that's fine because it's kind of worked and it's kind of got me to this really interesting place. But I know occasionally when it comes to the big decisions about life and things like that, I'm probably in my own way and I'm waiting for some kind of affirmation from somebody else. I think the other thing is that I've never really got over is I am a 43-year-old child. I very much, and I've been since I was about 30, very senior, professionally very senior, probably way before I was ready, and stopped having people telling me what to do and where to go and what brief to fulfill and all that kind of stuff. So I was effectively my own boss or the boss of other people quite quickly. So there is a bit of me occasionally that's waiting for somebody to tell me what to do. And I'm also aware of the fact that person doesn't exist and therefore I just have to get on and do stuff myself. Does that make sense? So that I think is something that is a constant drag on me, is just waiting for somebody to go go do that.
Have you ever had the chance to kind of slow down enough to get a sense of your own, I kind of want to say North Star almost, because if you have that own internal sense of rudder or orientation, it becomes easier to take actions, including knee-jerk ones, that are aligned with a particular direction, which could be aligned with specific values. You mentioned the impact potentially of some of the tech that you and countless others have been developing that are now in the living rooms of our kids, in the pockets of our kids, and what have you. And I think there's a lot of people waking up to this kind of sense of, well, I was climbing one mountain and now I'm seeing the impact of those actions. I didn't realize what they would be. Oh shit, let's try and make different choices. Yeah. Do you have a sense of orientation? Because I think that would also perhaps couple with the parental figure or the authoritative figure, Pete, that you're looking to for guidance that perhaps feels absent. I don't know if that's a clear question.
Yeah, I need to think about it. I guess if I look back over the last kind of 10 plus years, I've also been privileged enough to have worked on some stuff and been in some situations that are actually very good, technically very good for society. Done a lot of work in suicide prevention. I've done a lot of work in, online harms reduction. So that drive to make the world a better place with the technology that we build has actually been there. It's stuff that we've been doing. And I want to do more of that. So I know I want to kind of get into that space and do more of that. But, it doesn't pay the bills all the time, does it? So you have to do, other things occasionally. So I know what makes me happy. So I know what kind of, I know the kind of work that makes me wake up in the morning and go like, oh, we did that yesterday. We got that online harms bill through. We, put that technology into that charity that reduced that call line by this much money, all that kind of good stuff. I've never been able to go full throttle down that path because it's also emotionally quite draining, right? And so you put quite a lot of yourself into some of those kind of impact ventures. So I've always had to kind of do a blend of different things, which again, I think is a bit of an internal conflict sometimes, because you go, well, actually, I know I can be looking at things that make the world a better place. Why aren't I doing that all the time? Well, because
you've got bills to pay, and
it's kind of scary. Well, it's kind of scary. It's like, you give a lot of yourself away to those things, and then they take you away from your family, and then you kind of go into like strange headspaces to try and do some of that stuff. And again, I think that's like another conflict, but I don't know if that answered your...
It feels like there's quite a strong critical voice going on there. Like, it doesn't sound particularly compassionate, right? It's like, why don't you just do this? Or how come you're not? Or why aren't you doing the shit that you did when you were 30? And why aren't you doing more charitable stuff? And you're not balancing. Like, I get a real sense that there's a bit of like whipping around happening in there. Is it like that?
I think that's fair.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think that's fair.
Who's that? Because yeah, like who? So there's another Pete, right? There's the critical Pete going on, who may also be this other Pete, which is the one that you need to still prove something to, even though you've had all of these accomplishments in the past that don't seem to count in the eyes of critical Pete. Who's that guy?
Yeah, just moments, aren't they? Yeah, well, I mean, I don't like, that's a tough one to answer. Like, that is a tough one, and I get it. Like, so I'm not here having this conversation with you because like I'm feeling chilled about life. It's that voice that is like, okay, I'm going to go speak to some people. I think that critical Pete is there all the time. I think that critical Pete comes from a sense of drive and purpose and awareness, and knowing that I've always had quite a lot of people saying nice things to me at work and stuff like that. That was good. That was brilliant. Well done. Blah, blah, blah. Awards. There's a cupboard full of awards over there, which they stay there. Like, I don't want those out. I don't need that. And I do think there's a kind of, that critical Pete is kind of often going, I didn't deserve all those things that are in that cupboard over there, or that's a nice thing you've just said to me, thanks very much, but we're not quite there yet. We've got to do more. We can drive further. We can go harder. We can make some positive change. And so I think I'm always like that guy that's going, I haven't quite, there's a bit more we can do. There's a bit more we can do. There's a bit more we can do. Like, we've got one person off the bad list. There were another two that we can help, and so on and so forth. So, that's where I think that stick that I beat myself with comes from sometimes, is a kind of drive to, not like change the world. I'm not a kind of vigilante or anything like that, but I'm constantly thinking like, right, yesterday was all right, but it could have been 2 times better.
Right. So do you want the good news or the bad news first?
Oh no. Give me the bad news. It's terminal, isn't it?
The bad news is that critical Pete is insatiable and will never be satisfied with what you give him with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You knew that anyway, so it's not really terrible news. The good news is that you can dispense with him and stop trying to satisfy him all the time if he's never going to be satisfied.
Okay.
You gotta believe
Quite loud,
that.
though.
Yes, well, I mean, it's not as easily said than done, but where Natalie's going, and then I'll shut my mouth and let her take that, because I think she's really good. She's really good at this rudder stuff and finding this kind of intrinsic drive towards things. It's a much better motivational place to come from. What do I want to do? what would be the best expression of myself, and can I make the systemic choices to make it work financially and all that kind of stuff, rather than responding to this wagging finger critical Pete who's never going to be happy anyway and needs you to get it right on every level. Yeah. So if you can start of this part of this process is starting to doubt critical Pete's, starting to not allow him to direct you and make you feel terrible and that you're not enough. So this is the nice handover now, Natalie, so if you're ready for it. So you can listen to the kinds of things that foster the intrinsic drive towards creation and self-expression with your skills.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to just give you some space to respond to that if you want before I kind of jump in.
It makes sense. I think what's really interesting, and I think we've already covered it, is how self-aware I feel. And so, there's always a bit of me that's like, what you just said. It's like, yeah, I kind of know. Not arrogantly, but it's like, you're like, I know, because that's the voice that's been going in my head. So I totally agree with everything you've just said, because it's the thing that keeps going round and round and round inside the thing on my neck. So
yeah, and sometimes you can have too much self-awareness, and what can happen is like, I know this and I still haven't managed to change it, or now I feel bad that I can't manage my bad critical part, right? So there's a part where it reaches a limit and then you got to rest, right? And it's like, okay, so it's not really about understanding it so much at this next stage. It's about really a more profound shifting into a different gear.
Yeah.
Although it really helps to start with a lot of self-awareness. And if you don't have that, you got to build that up first.
Okay, so one of the things that you mentioned earlier, which was a couple of things I would like to kind of thread together, and it connects also to the cupboard that you have behind you, which is in the top, I'm guessing the top level of your house, stashed away literally in the attic. Behind closed doors.
Yeah, exactly.
The achievements or recognitions from others of your achievements. So there's something there that's quite interesting to me, and the fact that when we opened our conversation, you named quite early on kind of the difference between you temporarily now at 43 looking into the future but also being dragged by the past versus you at 30 and thinking about all these things that you're going to achieve, the next thing. And the one thing that really came to my mind as you're talking about these different stages or chapters in life, and I'm curious what you think about this, is that when we're in our 30s, it's kind of, one hopes, if we're lucky and privileged and we've kind of had some good breaks and worked, all of those things, that there's this anticipation for the future. There's this sense of expansion, of leaning towards something, building something. You mentioned leading teams, you're at this high position, and it's almost like you've hit that level quite early on. And I think my feeling is that there's something that can happen if we're lucky, and I do think it is an opening up that is a precious opportunity around our 40s, where rather than looking up, we start to look into the depth quality, which is, hold on, does any of this matter? How am I, making the most of my life? What impact am I having on the people I most cherish? We start to think possibly about legacy, about all of the things that you've done with your business, with tech, to prevent harms and the rest of it. And these qualities of questions, again, if we're lucky, start to permeate our work, the decisions that we make and the rest of it. But I think there's something around, and you mentioned this in the answers that you sent over as well, this kind of sense of when you look at other people who are successful, or you listen to the podcast of other people, folks who are, in my experience, much older, who have this quality of presence about them, have learned to hold lightly their own critical voices and also the accolades that they thought they cherished when they were young. And because of the holding lightly of it, they're able to kind of take decisions from a place of, it's like a rooting into what kind of person do I want to be, and it's less connected with fear or risk or recognition or validation. And so I'm curious for you, moving into these 40s, almost as an initiatory period, what are the things that mean most to you? And not just professionally, because I think you're ready to flip it. You've been talking about this anyway, and you've already got examples of it in your life, with your kids, in your profession. What are you yearning towards or into?
That's a really big question. Yeah, I mean, that's the big one, isn't it? That's like the meaning of it all. And I think, I don't mean that in like the meaning of life kind of way, but
well, the meaning of your life.
Yeah, but that is the thing, isn't it? I think that's a big question. I think we all want to feel like we've made the most of the time that we've got.
Yeah.
And I think we all want to make sure that the minutes count, and that, you know, it's all got a reason. It's all going there. And I think I'm at a crossroads where I'm like a whisker away from deleting all my LinkedIn and my Twitter and like all of this like external Pete, who's the noisy introvert, and just going like, oh, maybe all that was that person back there. Like, maybe I just need to like go and just hide for a little bit and just trying to make some of those decisions. And I think I'm just getting ready to kind of decide whether to make those decisions or not, if you see what I mean. So I think I think it's a really interesting kind of, what do I want next? Actually, kind of what I want next is a bit of peace and quiet. What I want next is a bit of, you know, the pressure off from me and them and everything else that's going on in the world right now, and a way of dealing with the guilt of doing that. Does that make sense? Because
yes.
like, I also feel like, well, actually, there's quite a lot of stuff that I do that makes an impact in a positive way. And if I do just go and like delete all of that and go be quiet over there, does that affect those people who maybe what I've done, what I do, does have a positive impact on? So it's an interesting crossroads.
I'd like to challenge you a little bit on that, because I hear where you're coming from. There's a couple of things. Okay, I'll leave with a short anecdote. So there was an artist that I'd read about who every 7 years would spend an entire year not working. And she would travel and meet people, go completely offline, be unreachable by all kinds of telecoms. And she said that that was the way in which she was able to really show up in her life, in her work. And I've heard of entrepreneurs who do something similar. It doesn't have to be a whole year. Maybe it's a 6 month or 3 month or 1 month sabbatical. But you also find it in all kinds of, you know, spiritual practices, where people go to Vipassana meditations and they're away for 10 days. My sense is there's always noise. There's always someone suffering. There's always a cause. There's always pain in the world. The question beneath that, I think, is, and you mentioned the minutes. The minutes are important, but your presence and the quality with which you fill those minutes is more important. And I think that there is something that you talk about self-awareness, that yearning for quietness. We need to create space in which to be in the silence, for the little voice to be louder, to be able to really tune into what it is that perhaps we're called to do next or called to become. And that requires a commitment to yourself to have that time and to carve it out. And obviously not just sort of saying, right, wife and kids, I'm off, see you later.
Yeah.
Or, you know, cancelling everything. Maybe it's a question of having the conversation with your family and saying, what do you think about this? Having a conversation about what it could look like. And then maybe on your social channels, if you say you want 3 months, you'll be like, I'm taking a 3 month sabbatical. I've seen other people do it, and it can be a transformative thing just to sort of signal that for others as well. So in terms of getting off the kind of the guilt or the hook, that's probably going to be there in some form anyway. But if you're going to
I've got one for that one anyway. So
oh yeah, good. Jump in.
No, finish, and then I'll pick it up.
That I just think, you know, if you have a clear sense that you need to be quiet and to take time for yourself, then that's what you need in this instance. And I think you have the possibility to make that a reality. So
I'll tell you the other thing that's really fascinating about what you just said is how, and I've got like an anecdote as well. So
Go for it.
I'm on the board. I'm on the board at Headspace. So
Oh, no way.
Or was like until the end of last year, and I'm the least meditative person there because I'm like I can't meditate, I can't be mindful, it just doesn't work. I'm not one of these people that can sit quietly. I've got to be busy, but I do love having that space to think. Do you know what I mean? So my version of meditation would be weirdly going to the football and shouting at overpaid Premier League football players with my son. Like I find it really,
Brilliant.
I do. I find it really meditative. I find it like as a kind of a really good release for things, and finding those moments I think is really precious. So I totally take what you're saying. Like I get it, but I also think I've never quite found that way of stopping, being quiet, going and just quietening things down a bit, because like it's always noisy. So it's interesting.
But I don't mean about being quiet internally
I don't
necessarily.
practice what I preach.
But also, like, there's this thing of people talk about meditation. I really, because I also find it challenging. But I think there are other ways. We're getting back to one of my favorite topics here, like active quietening. So things like going for a really freaking strenuous hike, that will quieten your brain after a certain time. Or going dancing, or doing like there's this amazing course called The Journey at Embakum, which I did in 2023. It's just a week, and I did it in January. It was freezing. It was amazing. Like things like that, where you're out in nature, you don't have access to your devices. There's some strenuous activity going on, and you're just you're so transplanted into a different space that you're not sitting with your thoughts all day. You're participating in something else. But it's not like a doing nothingness. It's an active engagement from a different, more embodied place. That might be interesting to look into.
Yeah.
Aaron,
definitely.
you wanted to.
Yeah. See, I think there's a deeper issue. I think your instinct is right. Like I think you want to get away from the noise, and these things are opportunities to do that. But I think you also want to be able to be in your everyday with more quiet, and more quiet is actually middle P, developing middle P, right? Of which meditation is actually a really good way to do that, which is why it's particularly hard for you. But I wanted to go to the guilt first, right? The guilt comes from critical P. And for change, we're not coming from Jung, we're coming from transactional analysis now. But you can really give that up, actually, kind of easily, when you ask yourself at a very deep level, who am I answering to in the choices that I'm making? And if you're answering to critical P, you're going to feel guilty. If you're answering from middle P, which hears the critical voice and hears the desire and hears the kid part and hears the grown-up part in a kind of equanimity, then you just kind of make an adult decision from middle P, right? And then that's your decision. That's your grown-up decision. So you don't have to feel guilty. It's just you're making the best choice you can make from the variety of all this data that you have. Earlier, when you said, I'm just this like 43-year-old kid, I thought, that's actually really important, because when you're in the child ego state, you answer to the parent, right? And if you don't have the person on the outside telling you, you have the person on the inside keeping you straight and narrow, right? By making conditions. But they're not the appropriate condition. They're maybe the appropriate conditions for a 30-year-old or 20-year-old. Now you're kind of like, okay, if I take the space that Natalie is suggesting and use that as an opportunity to subvert my ideas about critical Pete, widen this middle Pete space, listen, you really don't have to worry about guilt. You might have to take my word on it. You can worry about guilt a little bit in relation to this internalized relationship with the critical part of yourself, but that's just a conversation in your head. If you take the time that Natalie's talking about to find middle P and then be able to kind of keep coming back to him every day, you don't have to be at war with yourself. You just gather information, and then when the balance starts to tip, it starts to tip.
Yeah, it's interesting that. I don't think it's relevant. If you don't mind me just interjecting there, I'm not sure it's relevant, but I've often wondered this. I'm a twin, so I have a twin brother, and so for like 18 years, I'm a pack hunter. Like there's two of us, so there's always another, like literally another me in everything. So we were reasonably inseparable. And then I moved up to London, and then like he's still back down in the southwest, and obviously you kind of drift apart slightly. But I guess one of the things that I've always struggled with is solitude and loneliness, and like spending time on my own, to Natalie's advice, and kind of what we're saying now about trying to find that space to find it. And I've always wondered whether that kind of an aversion to that isolation is because I've got a twin in the world, and I was kind of so used to spending all my time at the hip with somebody else. I've never quite got to the bottom of that one, but have you ever heard about that? Is that something normal?
Well, my mother's actually an identical twin, and I think she has she's had a similar experience. That almost like the default position is with, in a really profound kind of a way.
It's like when people started changing their pronouns, 18 months ago and stuff, and I'm like, whatever. I'm like, I've always been an us. So it were like wow. Kind of, it never really kind of. So, but then again, I find that I've always wondered if that's like one of the chips on the shoulder is, I'm used to having a collaborator. I'm used to having somebody to tell me what to do or when to do it, or to always like a partner. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a really interesting one. Different kind of relationship as well. Like,
I mean, I wouldn't want to make a conclusion about that in this really short conversation, but I would say actually you do need an internal collaborator. The reason why there's the fear of the loneliness or the quietness is because your collaborator's a dick half the time. Right? Right? Critical Pete's not a great collaborator. He's an asshole. And if you can diminish...
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, diminish that and have a bit more compassion in space from, you're not doing it good enough, or do this, you're not what you were, like, goodness. Perfect. Get a twin in there. Get a collaborative twin in there, not a dickhead guy who wants to boss you around.
It's true. I've done a lot of work over the years. This is one of the things that weirdly Martin Daubney and I worked quite closely on after the kind of Humanize the Web thing, was like toxic masculinity. And I hate the term. I think it's bollocks, but but the notion of what it kind of represents, and also being like, well, kind of, I'm like that. Like all the stuff that we've been trying to help other people get through and sort out, and walls to break down and barriers to like remove and stuff. It's like that's me. Like, so I'm aware of the thing that it is, even if the terminology irks me slightly. And so again, like, you're right. I am a dick, and I do have to get out of my way. And
it's like you're an orchestra, and the violinist is a bit of a dick, and the others are like, guys, be a bit kinder.
No, but I know what you mean. But that one that bit that's not kind is like not kind.
Yeah.
And the reverse of toxic masculinity is, what is a kind of masculinity that holds boundaries and holds firmness and still helps you get things done without being a dick about it. And I think that's kind of I think men struggle with, particularly because their examples generally haven't been particularly good in holding boundaries in ways that are firm but kind and compassionate.
Definitely.
I think there's also something else here. So you're saying about like, recognizing that the things in the system that you're trying to change, it always also exist within oneself, within you. And I think there's something else, you were talking about this earlier about kind of keeping going, and then you're just going to end up in burnout. And one of the things that I've come up against quite a lot in the last year, maybe 2 years, is how, especially when we care about all the suffering and we want to do something good and we want to make the minutes count, there can be this sense that, especially an individualistic kind of more industrialized countries that are oriented towards production and value, that we think that we have to extract the productive value from every single minute in order to quantifiably reduce suffering in the world. And whilst the intention is loving and good, it's still operating through those systemic levers that say this is the only way to get there. And one of the things I've come up against, to sort of articulate it perhaps in a clearer way, is that actually taking a different approach that isn't currently being supported by the system or systems is to take a bit more time, is to be compassionate, is to kind of not worry so much about the quantity of output, but maybe the quality and the depth become more important. There's kind of like, there are ways in which that yearning can express itself in the world. And I think the current ways in which we typically go are the ways of burnout, competition, criticism, guilt, all of that stuff gets amplified. And there can be a revolutionary or rebellious quality to choosing to do things differently, to experimenting with doing things differently and modeling that for other people. And I think that's also something else that could be quite interesting to play with. What does it look like if instead of thinking about what success looks like on X, Y, and Z spreadsheet and celebrating it as it is, but also kind of going in a bit and slowing down a bit. I'm not saying about like sitting on your sofa and just not doing anything, because I don't think that's your your natural bent. But
that's not me.
I know.
But do you think? Can I ask you questions? Yeah, I'm going to ask you questions. Do you think? Again, it's really interesting when we started by talking about 2015, right? And 2015, I think, was not just a big year for me in terms of I've just heard these things and they kind of resonated with me and like this is great, but I think the world changed quite dramatically from 2016 onwards. Fuck me, like it became angry, right? It's been an angry place for quite some time, but I think everybody's suffering from that to a certain extent. Like, do you hear it? Do you feel that? Like, has the world just become a little bit more like red, not green? I don't mean politically either. I mean, like, it's just angry, right?
I think it's stressed. I think it's fearful. I mean, obviously there's lots of things and depends on where you are, but there's a huge amount of uncertainty. People are worried about security, financially, politically, ecologically. People are getting pitted against each other when actually what helps is to come into community, to be able to share, have these conversations together. It's harder now than it was then, I think. Aaron, what do you think?
Yeah.
Well, I just think about what you do, Natalie, and what you're really so good at. Like, the 2015 Humanize the Web thing, it has these ripples, right? And you've always been about making communities, and being in communities is what you do with your Flourishing Futures. And it's a really inspiring thing. And I think, the world is scary and unpredictable, and who the fuck knows where it's going. But when you look locally, and I think it's part of the question you're asking, because it's great the high impact things that you've done, Pete, with the Online Safety Act and the suicide and all that kind of stuff. But also, how you are as a dad, how you are at home, how you're able to be present in moments, how you're able to speak with us. I do think, without being woolly about it, that acting locally, creating respectful local environments and communities is really important. And I think we do tend to internalize all this stuff. Social media doesn't help. We've all got our own kind of critical Pete inside. We're just talking about yours today. And I think it's hard to live in a world like this and feel like actually what you have to do is soften rather than harden. But I feel like there's a lot of softening that needs to be happening. And I think within you, there's softening that needs to be happening. And it's kind of what we're trying to speak to. You can be soft and be firm. You can be soft and have boundaries. You can be soft and accomplish really great shit. And you don't have to like push yourself critically to do those things. You can just kind of, ease into it more fluidly, I think, without sort of spinning that, we aren't in a really volatile, scary situation. Globally.
But that's really fascinating because that in itself is really fascinating because it's like from about 2016 onwards is when someone like me should be softening. You know, like the kids are getting to a certain age, you know, success, whatever that means, is stamped like, well done. But the world suddenly becomes quite tough for like everybody, and like lots of really crazy shit happens. Like it just blows up. It's just nuts. And I think ordinarily I probably would have softened and got a bit easier on myself and kind of taken a breath and stepped back and enjoyed the successes and like really kind of gone like, okay, it just becomes really difficult, doesn't it? Because at the same time, you've got all these external pressures going, like people like you have got to try and solve these problems, because if you don't do it, no one else is going to do it. Or if a group of you don't come together and try and solve these things, like, you know, no one's going to do it. And so it is like a nexus of lots of different forces at work over the last kind of 10 years. I think at the end of last year, I got to the point where I went like, okay, I'm overwhelmed by all this now. Like this is like crazy. So anyway, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's just not sustainable, right? Like maybe, yes, when people are up against the wall, they have to defend themselves, but you can't be up against a wall for, you know, a decade and a half. Yeah. And you have to show your vulnerable belly in the right places where it's going to be received nicely, and not show it to the other parts of the world where it might not be. But I'm also, you know, with the hardness of boundaries and stuff, I'm aware of time and how we bring this to your process, which I'm wondering whether you feel that you have an understanding of a kind of softening that you could take forward from this conversation, and what that might look like if we're just thinking locally, like if we're just thinking like over the next 4 to 6 weeks, what might you be able to bring forward to shift some of this?
Oh God, decision-making. That doesn't work. Yeah, that doesn't work for a busy procrastinator. I definitely, like, I hear what you're saying. I definitely need to take some time every week to go and sit somewhere and just kind of take stock a little bit. Not listen to music, not like just go be a bit of a thinker, and not feel guilty about being a bit of a thinker. I think that's definitely something I get that I need to go and try and do and not put it off. I think it's really difficult for somebody to just stop being critical of themselves. And what I mean by that, it's not me being dismissive of advice. It's like, I can't just switch it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't just go like, oh, that's got to stop.
Something you can practice. Hold on. So like with the not stopping, and this is something that's come up a few times in these sorts of conversations, and someone helped me with this once, and it sounds quite banal, but you could have, I would suggest try this for a couple of weeks, get a little pocketbook, and when you notice that you're being critical, write down exactly as close as you can, word for word, what the critical thought is, which sounds like a really weird thing to do, but try it. Write it down. And at the end of the day, when you've got your day's critiques, look through it and perhaps out loud say to yourself, all right, actually, how much is this true? How much can I let go of this? Another practice you can do on top of that, if it's feeling quite kind of like, oh my God, I really feel overwhelmed by and identified with these critiques, is in a different color on the opposite side to write down all of the evidence that goes against that. So for instance, for me, it might be similar to you, actually, you're not making enough of your time. Your impact is blah, 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 blah. And then you might say, yes, but today I had a conversation with Pete and he told me ... Or I spent time with my friends and that was a loving thing and I felt good when I did it and everyone felt happier off the back of it. Like, that's a practice that you can engage in so that it isn't just kind of going round echoing in your head and making things difficult. Like, to put it on paper can be a simple, practical intervention. Would you be up for trying that? I know it's a bit odd, but like, you could have it like your weird critic book and just carry it with you.
Totally. I did something last year. I did something really unexpected last year, and it was like a very self-indulgent, but it was good fun. It's like I wrote somebody else's biography, right? Ooh. So, was like incredible experience because you see the benefit of writing everything down, so like journaling, as you say, is great. Like I've done it for other people, like literally, like spent hundreds of hours with people, like writing stuff down. So it's so cathartic. But I've never really felt like I should just write my own thing down because I don't think my thing is that interesting.
Just try it for shits and giggles.
So I try it. Yeah, I will.
But you have to commit to a period. So like 2 weeks minimum, every single day. There needs to be something written in the critic page. And then something on the other side that goes against that. And just see it. And over time, you'll be like, it's a bit... It just creates a different relationship with it.
And I would add one extra layer as well. What about your kids?
He said hide it from his kids.
I got hide
it from everyone. Yeah,
it's just for you. Unless you want
there's also the aim of developing the middle Pete, who's actually writing down the negative and positive thoughts. And while you can't turn off the critical thoughts, you can see them for what they are, which is largely, not always entirely, but largely a sham. So the more you're writing that stuff down, externalizing it, the more you're building up middle Pete, who can say, I know your game, and I'm not going to reflexively answer to it because I don't want to feel guilty and I don't want to feel under pressure. Yeah. And you're going to have to trust a little bit that your direction, like for your life meaning and that kind of stuff, will come from a different source, but you need to kind of quiet down these other noises first.
Yeah, interesting.
And it may not be mindfulness meditation for you, right? It might be something a little that activates you in a different kind of way. There's always dance. There's always dance with Natalie. Yeah, that's what I'd say. So long as it doesn't involve dancing, I'm in.
Or hiking, you never know.
Hiking.
So we need to bring this to a close. I mean, we can keep talking about this for hours because it's just so interesting. But I know it seems a little daunting, perhaps. But how are you feeling about our conversation at the moment, like in this moment?
I mean, it's talking about stuff is always cathartic, right? So you get it out, and it's like problem shared, problem halved, all that kind of good stuff. I think writing stuff down is going to be a really interesting experiment.
Okay.
I'm going to say I've never done that. I've never done it like meaningfully for myself. It's always for other people. So I'm feeling like being totally transparent with you is helpful, and I've tried to do that to the best of my ability. And I've got a few things that I'm going to go and write down and have a go at and things like that.
Great. And we can, I'm just thinking we can put serendipity. Let's see what happens.
Serendipity. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you, but I'm thinking they're really good thought record documents. You didn't.
I think there's some lag time. Pete, you go ahead, and then we'll be quiet to listen to your answer because there's a lag.
No. I was just saying, like, the one thing that I take away is the one thing that I've always been very good at is just like seeing where the chips fall. So serendipity, if you like, and just kind of, I'm open to like trying stuff. So I'm going to try writing the thing down. I'm going to try looking at myself in the third person, not the one or two, and just see what happens.
All right.
And what do you anticipate might block you or be an obstacle in your way? What can you kind of maybe be a little bit ready for?
I will make sure I don't say I was too busy to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, nice one.
Because like we all do that, don't we? We all do that. Oh fuck, I'm going to do that thing, but I forgot, or I was too busy. So I've been very mindful of that. I've got to go away and process stuff. As in, I've got to go away and process this conversation and see what I think.
For sure.
And we can make this audio and the video available to you if you want to re-listen to it, so that you've got something to kind of take notes from. If you don't, no.
There are hundreds. There are TED Talks that I've done that I've never watched.
Oh wow!
And stuff like, and podcasts and stuff like, I can't.
Okay.
I don't do me.
All right, scratch that.
Well, you can listen to our review of it afterwards. How's that? And we'll suggest some resources.
Exactly.
And
I'll do that. I'll send it to my twin brother and say, watch this and tell me what you think.
Perfect.
So what are you most excited about next steps then?
Finding some quiet time, so I'm definitely taking that away. I'm really looking forward to that, so I'm going to go and do that. I am going to start making some decisions about what I'm going to do with myself professionally. I think saying it out loud is like, okay, the reason we're having this conversation in the first place is you're at a crossroads and now you've got to make some decisions. Otherwise, you're just going to be here this time next year as well. So I'm going to set myself a goal in the next couple of weeks is like, right, I'm going to make a decision about what's happening. And maybe I will go and open a record shop.
Could be an interesting outcome.
But not from one... Yeah, not from one conversation. But like, jokes aside, like I think it is time to just make some decisions.
Actually, we're still building it at the moment, Pete, but hopefully it'll be all up and going by the time this thing comes out. But in our community that's attached to this podcast, we are going to be putting all kinds of resources, and we're going to have accountability groups in there. And there are really great thought record sheets that we can create as well, so that you don't have to make it up yourself. There's a lot of stuff out there and resources. So ideally also not having to do it on your own helps. We'll send you an invitation to the community for free, by the way, because you've been a great guest with us. But just for other listeners,
that'd be amazing. Community. Yeah, community is important, I think.
Yeah,
getting people on your side and helping you be accountable in that less critical way, in a mutually supportive way, I think can do really good wonders.
Yeah. Definitely.
So I hope the first thing you're going to do is buy yourself
Go on. So carry on.
It's the lag. I was just going to say the first thing you'll do is you'll go out and get yourself a nice little journal that you can lock away and write all of these thoughts in. You've already got it. There you go.
Well,
it's empty as well.
It's a great time to start.
It's totally empty. Yeah, exactly.
Pete, thank you so much for your candor and your energy and your openness to go into this conversation with us. It's been really great talking with you, and we're gonna chat back with you in like 4 weeks, see how you're doing, see what's happened with the critic journal or however you want to name it. But yeah, thanks for taking the time to shop with us today.
Thank you very much for having me talk to you. Free therapy. It's great.